Deep in the German region of Westphalia, inside the grand castle of the Baron of Thunder-ten-Tronckh, a young man named Candide lives a life of absolute shelter. He has never experienced cold, hunger, or violence, and he assumes the entire world operates with the same frictionless ease as his uncle's estate. His worldview is entirely shaped by his tutor, Dr. Pangloss. Pangloss is a strict adherent to the philosophy of optimism. He teaches Candide that because a perfect God created the universe, we live in the best of all possible worlds. In this closed-loop logic, there is no senseless tragedy. Every misfortune is a necessary step toward a greater good. But this academic theory hits a practical wall when Candide acts on a romantic impulse. He kisses the Baron's daughter, Cunegonde, and is immediately and violently exiled from the only home he has ever known. Thrown out into the winter snow, Candide is about to discover a major flaw in his education. His entire belief in a perfectly benevolent universe relies on the physical protection of the castle walls. Now, he has to test that philosophy in the real world. The real world wastes no time. Candide is immediately conscripted into the Bulgarian army, where he is beaten and forced to drill and eventually dragged into a massive, senseless war. He watches thousands of men slaughtered in a conflict over borders he doesn't understand. He deserts the army, stumbling blindly across Europe. He reunites with the disease-ravaged Pangloss, and the two manage to secure passage on a ship to Portugal. But nature is just as hostile as the armies of Europe. A massive tempest tears their ship apart, drowning almost everyone on board before Candide and his mentor wash up on the shores of Lisbon. They step onto land on November 1st, 1755. This is the exact date of the historical Lisbon earthquake, one of the deadliest seismic events in recorded history. Buildings collapse, fires consume the wreckage, and tens of thousands of innocent people are crushed or drowned by the resulting tsunami. The survivors look for someone to blame. The religious authorities decide the earthquake was a divine punishment, so they organize an auto da fe, a public act of penance and execution. Candide is ritually flogged, and Dr. Pangloss is hanged to appease the heavens. In a matter of months, Candide has faced the absolute random cruelty of a natural disaster and the deliberate calculated cruelty of human institutions. No amount of logical maneuvering can frame these events as the necessary mechanics of a benevolent universe. The optimism of Westphalia is completely broken. Fleeing the Inquisition, Candide manages to rescue Cunegonde, who has survived her own series of horrific assaults, and the two escape across the Atlantic. They are joined by Cunegonde, a fiercely pragmatic guide who knows how to navigate the complexities of the New World. They arrive in South America expecting a fresh start, but they find the exact same systemic violence they left behind in Europe. The supposedly holy Jesuit missions are actively fighting colonial wars against the Spanish and Portuguese crowns, plunging the continent into bloodshed. This chart compares the stark reality of 18th century global living standards with what Candide and Cunegonde accidentally stumble into next, the hidden kingdom of El Dorado. Here, the metrics for poverty and mortality drop to zero. It is an actual functioning utopia. The streets are paved with gold and emeralds, scientific inquiry is the highest pursuit, and there is zero political or religious conflict. Notice what happens to Candide's personal security right here. After a month in absolute paradise, he chooses to leave. Driven by a romantic obsession with Cunegonde, whom he had to leave behind in Buenos Aires, he abandons safety. He loads up a herd of red sheep with priceless jewels and walks away from perfection. El Dorado offers endless peace, but human nature is restless. We are notoriously bad at sitting still in perfection, constantly inventing reasons to abandon what we have to chase, irrational, romanticized goals. Candide's fortune barely survives contact with the outside world. The moment he tries to book passage back to Europe, a corrupt Dutch skipper steals his remaining wealth, sailing off and leaving Candide standing empty-handed on the docks. Exhausted by the endless betrayals, Candide decides he needs a new perspective. He holds a contest to find the most miserable man in the province and recruits Martin, an impoverished scholar. Martin is the ideological inverse of Pangloss. He believes the world is entirely driven by malice and suffering. With the very last of his recovered gems, Candide and Martin sail to France. They make their way to Paris, a city considered the absolute pinnacle of European culture, philosophy, and high society. But high society has its own brutal mechanics. The Parisian elite immediately identify Candide as a mark. They flatter him, drag him into high-stakes card games where the deck is rigged, ensnare him in petty legal scams, and even hire an actress to impersonate Cunegonde to extort his remaining diamonds. The immense wealth of El Dorado bought Candide nothing but exploitation. He realizes that the refined drawing rooms of Paris are just as predatory and dangerous as the battlefields of Bulgaria. The weapons are just different. The journey ends at the edge of the Ottoman Empire. Candide and Martin arrive in Constantinople, tracking rumors that Cunegonde has been sold into servitude there. Candide finds his friends working as galley slaves. He drains the very last fraction of his remaining wealth to buy their freedom, ransoming Cacambo, the Baron's son, Pangloss, who miraculously survived his hanging, and finally, his beloved Cunegonde. But the grand reunion is a hollow shell. Years of trauma, abuse, and hard labor have taken their toll. Cunegonde has lost all her beauty. She is weathered, exhausted, and deeply embittered by her suffering. Candide marries her anyway, purely out of a stubborn sense of duty. The group settles onto a small, barren farm on the outskirts of the city. With no more journeys to take and no wealth left to steal, they fall into a paralyzing depression. They spend their days bickering, paralyzed by idleness, while Martin and Pangloss argue relentlessly over philosophy, solving absolutely nothing. They survived shipwrecks, earthquakes, and inquisitions, only to find that completing the quest doesn't grant happiness. Existing in a static state without a practical driving purpose is its own specific kind of hell. The deadlock breaks when the group meets an old Turkish farmer who lives on a small estate nearby. When they ask him about the recent violent political assassinations in the capital, he shrugs. He doesn't know the names of the victims, and he doesn't care. He explains his operating system. He ignores global politics and abstract philosophical debates entirely. Instead, he and his children focus strictly on the manual labor of their 20 acres. This localized physical work, he tells them, keeps away 3 great evils: idleness, vice, and want. As Pangloss starts to weave another intricate theory about how their suffering was a necessary chain of events, Candide doesn't engage. He isn't looking for a better argument or a more profound logic. He turns away from the abstract justifications of his tutor and the unyielding pessimism of Martin, choosing instead the silence of the field. He offers his old master a single final reply. That is well said, but we must cultivate our garden. On that small farm outside Constantinople, the group stops debating and starts working. Cunegonde becomes an excellent hand at pastry. The old woman takes care of the linen. Even the monk finds a purpose in carpentry. They find that the world hasn't become any less cruel. It's just that the quiet, repetitive labor of the garden leaves no room for the misery of their former thoughts. They stop looking at the horizon and start looking at the soil, finding the only peace that was ever actually within their reach.